We begin tonight with a story about a battle within the ranks of America's military. Women and men are reporting being raped, sexually abused, and intimidated by other American service people, often their immediate superior. We are devoting our entire first segment to this issue. In February, 17 active service members filed a class action lawsuit against Secretary of Defense Robert Gates and his predecessor Donald Rumsfeld for running, quote, institutions in which perpetrators were promoted and plaintiffs and other victims were openly subjected to retaliation. In a special report, News Center's Kathleen Shannon looks into sexual assault in uniform through the experience of three Mainers.
It was 4 serious assaults, one being a rape.
He had me around my neck like this and unbuckled my pants and everything and yanked them down. And
I was assaulted one night at the club and wasn't helped when I tried to get help. I tried to commit suicide.
Their stories are shocking and just 3 examples of what the military is now recognizing as a systemic problem. In 2005, the Department of Defense established the Sexual Abuse Prevention and Response Office.
I don't believe I'm quitting.
And the Department of Veterans Affairs began coordinating treatment programs like this one at the Togus Veterans Hospital in Augusta.
I usually see folks who have a lot of anxiety and have very damaged self-esteem.
Kathy Rusin is the Military Sexual Trauma, or MST, coordinator at Togus.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is only one of the mental health conditions that could result from military sexual trauma. We also see people who suffer from severe depression. People may have other forms of anxiety disorders. They may have other mental health difficulties.
Until 2006, the DoD classified sexual assault as a women's health issue. Now they not only include men, but have expanded the definition beyond rape and attempted rape to include other forms of assault and harassment. And all service members and veterans are now screened for sexual trauma. Recent studies by the VA and the DoD show roughly 10% of men, about 50,000, screened positive last year. Women serve in much smaller numbers, but the percentage screening positive is much higher, about 25%, or 48,000. In 2010 in Maine, 601 men sought treatment for sexual trauma, and 528 women. Military and Veterans Affairs sources believe these numbers likely represent 20% or less of the actual cases.
Service members experiencing that are not able to remove themselves from the situation and are often being harassed by the people that they who they're depending on for their safety in their lives. So the dynamics make sexual harassment in a military setting particularly challenging.
And I had to take the bull by the horns myself.
All 3 of the Mainers we talked to say they were attacked by an immediate supervisor who got them alone and with whom they had to continue working.
And they said that was not enough evidence.
Barry Watson was 21 in 1970, a Marine corporal serving his first of 2 tours in Vietnam. He believes he was assaulted by his immediate supervisor, a lieutenant, as retaliation for a perceived insult months before.
it didn't take long to have my pants off or anything.
At the time, Watson says there was no training about sexual harassment, assault, or how to report and prosecute it. Not knowing who to go to and fearing his life would be in danger if he reported it, Watson kept it all to himself.
I just kind of ignored everybody and just did what I was supposed to do. If I was told to do something, I'd do it. And I figured the more hours I was working, the faster the time would go by, and the faster I could get out of there.
Amy, who asked us to conceal her identity, was an 18-year-old married meteorology apprentice maid in the Navy in the mid-1980s when she says she was raped by a petty officer.
There wasn't a whole lot of support for me at the time. Several comments were made to me like I deserved it. Why didn't I fight harder to avoid it? Did I like it? And it was very derogatory.
When Amy tried to report the crime, first to the chaplain, he told her to move on.
And I threatened to commit suicide again to the chaplain, and they flew me to Bethesda, and I was discharged from the Navy 3 months later.
It was an honorable discharge, but the Navy did not acknowledge the rape or military sexual trauma as the cause. So Amy had no medical benefits to treat what amounted to PTSD-like symptoms.
The diagnosis was for a borderline personality disorder, which I'm not, but it basically creates an idea in many people's minds that you're crazy or that you're a troublemaker or both.
I didn't necessarily want everyone to know.
Jennifer Norris was in her mid-20s in 1998 when she was recruited to work full-time as a communications specialist with the Maine Air National Guard in South Portland. After all the paperwork was processed, her recruiter invited her to a party.
And when I got there, nobody else was there.
She says they started drinking, and she soon became immobilized. She believes she was drugged, and she says she remembers being raped.
Because there's no other explanation for why I couldn't move. I would have fought.
Norris went to a civilian rape crisis center because she was afraid to report it.
I didn't want to say anything to anyone because once you do, your career goes down the tubes.
When she got back from basic training, the recruiter had left the National Guard. But not long after she started her duties with the 265th Communications Squadron,
men put their hands on me when I didn't want them to, and I actually had to fight them off. I tried to do everything I could do to, what if I don't wear makeup? What if I don't do my nails? I knew it wasn't what I was wearing.
Right, because everyone's wearing the same thing.
Right. So I was like, how do I get this to stop? And I couldn't.
Norris says her boss, a master sergeant, started putting even more pressure on her.
I wouldn't give in, obviously, because he was married, he had 3 kids. I wanted nothing to do with him. I just wanted to work. And so I told him so over and over and over, and he wrote me this note.
The note tries to convince Norris to give in to, quote, animal instincts so she won't regret late in life that she didn't, quote, seize the moment. Norris was distraught, and a superior officer noticed.
He was a master sergeant, and so he brought me in, and he was really kind. And he's like, I've seen you go from loving the military and wanting to retire with them to you don't give a crap anymore. Can we talk about this? Because this isn't you. And I just broke down and told him everything that had happened, and not realizing that he had to report it to the commander.
2 of the men were eventually court-martialed and made plea agreements. Norris took a medical discharge.
You have to remember, in an issue like this, we're getting into the heart of the very culture of the military, the core of what happens.
Maine Congresswoman Chellie Pingree, who sits on the Armed Services Committee, has heard dozens of similar stories. She is now working with the DOD, VA, and other members of Congress, including Senator Susan Collins, on legislation that aims to provide a better system of prevention and reporting of sexual trauma in the military and to make it easier to access medical benefits and treatment.
It's highly dedicated people who work in a hierarchical-based system. Everyone is taught to, take whatever comes in front of you and just tough it out. And I think at some point you need an outside voice to say, hey, wait a minute, some things are completely inappropriate. We can't do this to our soldiers and then not take care of them, and we have to stop this in the culture.
Tomorrow night at 6, what the Department of Defense, Veteran Affairs, and Congress are doing to address the issue, and how all 3 of the Mainers we talked with are benefiting or could benefit from the changes.
Kathy, the numbers are really astonishing, and they raise the question, is sexual assault more prevalent in the military than in civilian society?
Everyone brings that up when this issue comes up. Some experts say yes, some experts say no. Kathy Rusin, the MST coordinator at TOGAS, says you have to keep in mind that it is the most underreported crime in the military, but it's also the most underreported crime in civilian society. So it's very tough to tell for sure. However, she does point to the statistics that we do have, which is about 1 in 6 American women report being raped or otherwise sexually abused in civilian society, as compared to about 1 in 4 in the military. There are very few statistics available, if any, in terms of rape of men in civilian society. So that's an even more nebulous question there.
All right, we look forward to the follow-up tomorrow night, too. Thank you. And if you are a member of the armed services and have been sexually assaulted or harassed, the Department of Defense offers a confidential crisis service. You can call 877-995-45 5247 from anywhere in the United States. You can also call, text, or use online services from anywhere in the world. We have a link to the SAFE helpline on WCSH6.com.